My childhood was very interesting. Uh, I have, curiously enough, very vivid memories of my early childhood, where I don't have any memories, let's say, of around 7 to 12. I don't have. My childhood was uh, based on lots of change. Uh, I don't know how many places we lived from the time I was 1.5 years old until I was 13. My folks moved. The war came along, and I lived with Opal and Gil. And I always had Opal there. In the late 30s, I lived with Opal and Gil for, I imagine, about 18 months. And then I don't know what my parents were doing during that time. But I do know that I went back to live with them again. And then when the war came along, my dad went back in the Navy and Mom went to Alaska, and I continued with Opal and Gil. I have some memories of travel when I was very young. For instance, I do remember, and I must have been 1.5 or 2 of scattering flowers on Puget Sound for my grandfather's funeral. I also remember meeting my grandfather in San Francisco. But these are fleeting kinds of things. There's no continuity to them or anything else. I have very fond memories of Ojai. We lived in a cabin in the Ojai Valley, and remember, for some reason, the smell of oak trees. And I used to play under an oak tree and it was very, very black dirt. I have just wonderful memories of that. Other than that, I don't, I can't say that there's anything really remarkable, save, well, 2 national things. One happened, I think, in probably 1936. I was on the front porch of our house downtown Ventura, and I heard this roar. And all of a sudden I saw a dark shadow come by, and I looked up, and there was the Graf Zeppelin. Mm. And it seemed to take forever for it to go across the street. That was really interesting. And then the next thing I have as a memory was getting the newspaper in 1937 and seeing the Hindenburg in flames. And other than One Man's Family, which we used to hear on the radio, and a science fiction thing that I remember from probably when I was 3 years old, 4 years old, it's called Latitude Zero. I don't have much memory of anything else. Well, my parents, we owned it was a restaurant, but it was not a full-time restaurant. It would cater to parties and clubs and things like that. And it was called Rancho Arnaz. It originally had been called the Arnaz Tavern. And that was about, I don't know, halfway between Ventura and Ojai. And that's where I went. I was there when I went to first grade, second grade. And then I remember third grade, we were back in Ventura. So we were there for 2 or 3 years. Most likely only 2 years. No. This was separate. He was in the typewriter business.
Okay.
But Opal was, being the problems that were happening with the Depression. Opal and Gil, my mom and dad, lived together for a while. No, everybody. When we moved from the cabin, we moved to an apartment on Poli Street, and then moved again out to the beach at Salamar. I mean, it's just one move after another, after another, after another. And then I finally went back to live with Opal and Gil in 37. They lived in an apartment out on the east end of town. Yeah, Ventura. And then they moved to an apartment house in town, and my folks moved to the same apartment house. And of course, that's where that was the time when the Hindenburg went down. But off and on, I was with Opal and Gil, throughout the whole time.
Mm-hmm.
I had no real knowledge of it. I always had 3 hots and a cot, and I saw people having trouble, and I saw people in lines, but it never directly touched me. Later on, after the Depression, we were coming out of the Depression, I became aware of strange things like the sheriff of Los Angeles County going over to the border to keep people from Oklahoma from coming in. And those kinds of things. But I never felt in any way deprived. I never went hungry. So it just wasn't a factor in my upbringing. No. I had a friend in grade school. His name was Reese Hallroyd. And Opal and Gil spent quite a bit of time with his folks. And Reese was my junior by about 2 years. And so we had fun when we got together, but that was about the only, quote, friend that I ever had in Ventura. Oh, yeah. My very first grade teacher was Miss Penny, and I fell in love with her. My third grade teacher, and I can't remember her name, but she really taught me how to look under the rocks and discover stuff. And then my senior math teacher really piqued my curiosity about mathematical abstraction. I never accomplished it, but she really turned me on. I spent an awful lot of time listening to records in high school. An awful lot of time. And between that and my homework and everything else, I had not junior high, but in the up through 6th grade, I had a real interest in chemistry. Opal and Gill bought me a chemistry set, and I had several accidents with that. That sort of waned. But I really got interested in records, and Opal and Gill were not at all interested in what was be called classical music at that time. And so I had never heard any classical music. And we had a friend, I don't know even what his name was, but I went over to his house with Opal and Gill, and it was only a few blocks from where we were living on South San Clemente. And he put on Ferdy Grofé for me, and it just knocked me out. The Grand Canyon Suite. And so my next few years were hell-bent for election, spending money on old 78 records. And I also got turned on to Dizzy Gillespie about that same time. Not really. High school, how can I put it? High school was there, and most of the time I wasn't. I was off daydreaming someplace. I paid attention to what I had to pay attention to, but I wasn't a straight A student or anything like that. I spent most of my time actually getting out of things. I got out of phys ed because I was a member of the ROTC band, and so that counted for physical education. So I never had to do any physical education. I spent most of my time, my junior and senior year with Dick, and I can't remember his last name. Maybe I'll come up with it. But Dick was an unbelievable pianist. And actually, I lived with he and his mom my senior year because Opal and Gill had moved to Pasadena, and they didn't want to take me out of Van Nuys for my last year. So that sort of worked out pretty well. I started playing in junior high school, trumpet. Well, in junior high, which was in Ventura, I had regular physical education and everything else, and I was a member of the band there. And then when I moved to Van Nuys, that's when I went into ROTC. And I was there for 3 years. 9th, 10th, 11th, well, 4 years, 12. Well, uh, I was very aware of what was going on. I was very upset with what was going on because um, we had punished some of our community who shouldn't have been punished. The Japanese folks that were in our town. And then we were very aware that the Japanese were off our coasts because they had made several attempts to come on land with two-man submarines. And I remember in 42 them shelling one of the oil refineries up north of Santa Barbara. And I didn't realize I was colorblind at the time. But I could go up and down the coast and pick out the gun emplacements along the line because they looked phony to me. And they were just the wrong color. And so I could pick out howitzer emplacements and stuff like this. Gil was an air raid warden, and we used to have air raid drills, and we used to have blackouts and stuff like that. The thing I remember probably most was that you had to have tickets for shoes and gas and sugar, and everything was rationed. And other than that, that's about it. I do. My initial reaction was not a good one, because I don't know how I knew it, but I knew that it was something extremely different, and that whatever it was in its difference, it was not good. I was glad that finally the war came to an end, but that initially disturbed me. Yeah, early on, um, I really wanted to go in the Navy Air Corps, and I was hoping to go to Annapolis to fly. That sort of was compromised by Opal and Gill constantly harping on me being a doctor. Gill wanted to be a doctor and never could. And I mean, the Depression just kept everybody grinding their nose, you know. His brothers, he had two brothers, two brothers that lived in the immediate area, and all of those guys worked for Union Ice Company. But I guess I was very fortunate in that my high school had a whole music curriculum, including music theory and counterpoint. And so I had had counterpoint, I had had 2 years of music theory, I had had special studies in fugue, I had had music history, all of that. And that started me thinking about writing. And of course, Dick didn't help. He constantly was egging me on to write. And it started off with dance band charts. And then his last name's Turner. And then Dick wrote a piece for me for trumpet and string quartet, and that never got performed. I'm sorry. Somewhere. Yeah, I think so. I think I have one or two, yeah.
Did you play any of those with the Big Blue Band?
No.
Okay.
No, we didn't. And then, of course, polio came along, and that decided once and for all that I wasn't going to be in a military direction. And so the Opal and Gill were still screaming about being a doctor, and I said, I'll do this. I've been offered a job at the hospital and to go through x-ray training, and I'll do that for a year. And if I like it, then maybe I'll continue on and go on to college with a medical degree in mind. Well, I had a good time doing the x-ray stuff. It was fun. But I was attached to a tuberculosis ward for 2 months. And we had a couple of little girls, 3, 4 years old, and I used to do their chest plates, and we lost both of them, and that taught me that I was not capable of doing that kind of stuff. No. College of Pacific was recommended by my old band director from Ventura. His name was Amundsen. And he said I should apply there. And of course I did, and everything is history. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh, the most memorable concert was the Dave Brubeck Quartet. I mean, they came and hung out with us, and I was a member of Phi Mu Alpha at the time, and we took him into Phi Mu Alpha as a guest member, and I mean, that was something very, very special. Oh, my Lord. I'll be honest with you, I don't remember. We spent a lot of time in the end zone, which is the local campus cafe. But our first real encounter was I was playing piano for something on a street. It was one of those Friday night mixer dances. And she waltzes in with this red and white striped dress on that was a knockout. And I was hooked from there on. Well, we did, but choir class was, I mean, Bodley was all business and no fun. So you couldn't mess around in choir class. He had your you had to give him your full attention. But yeah, we did meet in choir class. Oh, hectic. Everybody and his brother was there, and I had scrambled to try to get the music ready, and one thing after another, and it was just a blur.
Yes, it's all right.
I don't remember. The choir sang, the COP choir. I did the processional and the recessional for brass instruments. Seems to me there was a soloist, but I don't recall exactly. I don't have the recessional processional music. It was lost in transit. The reception was a lot of fun, but again, I don't remember a whole lot about the reception. I remember the cake and all of that stuff and everything else, and I remember her going away outfit was elegant, and that's about it. Yes. Adeline came into our picture in 1946, right after my dad got back from the Navy. He met her in Los Angeles, and I don't know all of the ins and outs,
Right.
but they got married, I think, in 47. And so that's when she became a permanent part of the landscape. 14, right? Yeah. No, I never lived with them. I lived with Opal and Gil all during my teens. Yeah. Well, we literally had to leave College Pacific because my folks withdrew funding for my education. So we moved back down south, and I got a job at Shermer Music selling records for 33 cents an hour. And I must have stayed there for a good year and a half, maybe. And then I got a job at May Company selling women's shoes. And that lasted until I got the job at Douglas. And my first job at Douglas was as a planner. What planning is you go through all of the blueprints and you count all the nuts and bolts and make sure they're on order, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then I got a notice, and I can't remember how that happened, but anyway, they were looking for an X-ray technician but an industrial X-ray technician. And I had no experience with that, but I told them, I know how to jockey an X-ray machine. And so they hired me as a non-destructive testing person. And that's the way I finished my career at Douglas. Yeah, I had gone back to school at the very. Oh, I'd say about the last year and a half at Douglas. 57, 58. I graduated in 59. And well, no, it took me longer than 2 years because I didn't go full time at first. I just went and took some courses and, you know, 59, May. No, I was going to go on with my master's degree, and so I was still working at Douglas, and I spent a semester at USC in the graduate program, and that got too expensive. And so I went back to Long Beach State and finished all of my requirements for a master's degree at Long Beach State, but I never submitted my thesis. And the reason I didn't do that is because I was never happy with it. It was because I had a Bachelor of Science degree in music. They didn't have a Bachelor of Music in composition. I had to do a written thesis. They wouldn't accept a composition. And so my topic was Beethoven, the evolution of the modern sonata form. And I just never, I finally got it finished, and it was, I had lost some coursework. And so I just finished my master's degree at Iowa when I got there. It was fun. Number one, I enjoyed the little town of Fayette, and there were lots of interesting people on the faculty, and it was small enough that you got to know a lot of people. No. Well, the experience was at first daunting because I lived in the boys' dorm for, I don't know, a month and a half, something like that. And then we finally got a house and got everything ready for you guys to come. And but it was interesting because I got to do lots of different things. Some things that I really enjoyed and some things I didn't enjoy very much. Teaching education courses. That goes into I wasn't very much interested. But I did the necessary things. I taught music history for the first time. That was very interesting for me. Yeah, I really enjoyed teaching music history. And then I also taught music appreciation for the general public. And that was a fun course. And then I taught all of the necessary composition and theory courses and stuff like that. But it was all new and all very exciting because the weather changed and the leaves dropped off, and all of a sudden we had 6 feet of snow, and you know, Yeah, it was, but it was like I said, it was fun. I really enjoyed it. Well, I had all of the theory program, music history. I shared with Legrand, uh, and I had the band the first year, uh, and then the second year we started the Big Blue Band. No, I didn't have a marching band. I had a concert band. Okay, we didn't start the marching band until year two. Um, uh, and that was really at the end of that year because we had uh, started a pep band that year for basketball season, and then that eventually went in. So I had the marching band and the concert band and the Big Blue Band. Mm-hmm. 6 and well, almost 7 years. Nothing other than it was fun. Well, they were very, uh, very supportive of the family and everything else, and uh, they helped us a lot. And then I also had a very good friend in Charlie Clark. He was really special. And another guy by the name of Richard Clark, who went on to be a United States Senator. We had lots of fun together, just kicking things around. Well, that was the second house we lived in. I guess the most interesting thing about the red house on the hill is that you wouldn't be able to count the number of bats that would come out every night. Right. Oh, yeah. Well, you know, all of a sudden uh, this was probably the second time the Big Blue or the marching band had taken to the field, and all of a sudden they get out there, and lo and behold, your sister in red boots is out leading them. And so everybody got a kick out of that. And, but that was a fun time. The whole time in Fayette was very nurturing. We learned a lot about people, and people were really nice to us. And yeah, undoubtedly, the uh, when we moved from the red house out to Pooh Corner, that really convinced me once and for all that I wanted to be in the forest.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I don't remember all the details. All I remember is that that place came up for rent. I mean, for sale, and we talked to the bank, and they agreed with us, and we bought it. Well, yeah. By 1967, I had decided that I really needed to go finish my education. So I applied to the University of Iowa, and that's the reason that we had gone back to Iowa in the first place, is because I wanted to be with Dr. Richard Hervig, who was at Long Beach State the year before I got to Long Beach State, and I had heard a concert with his piano concerto. And I was so impressed that I decided I needed to study with this guy. And so we made the trek back, and then finally to Iowa City, and we were going to try to hold on to Pooh Corner and maybe go back. I'm not sure. But all of a sudden, the state decided they were going to put in a dam and make a lake there. And so we haggled with the state over and they finally gave us the choice that they'd condemn it or we'd take whatever they'd give us, and so that's what happened. The sad part of that is that the lake was never to be. They didn't build the dam because of some geologic problems that they ran into. And they had moved the house, so all was gone. Yeah, a little bit of sadness there. But still, it was a great experience and a fun place for you guys. No, I made up my mind I wanted to study with him, and probably the next in line would have been University of Illinois. We had contemplated moving to Canada when the Vietnam War got out of control. And the reason for that was I didn't want you guys to be drafted. Mm-hmm. I also didn't want you to be turncoats. Mm-hmm. And so I would have had to have taken you there before you were of draft age. And so we thought very seriously about going to Canada. That was probably 69. Yeah, that's prior to Ball State. I came in 70. Well, we met the Alshouse. Oh, I can't talk. We met the Alshouses through Mom. She was teaching, and Mary was assisting at school, and they got to be friends. And then Mary invited us out, and we met all of the family, and we kept going out and going out and going out. And then I started doing things around the farm with Ralph. One thing led to another, and I was driving a tractor and mowing hay and putting in a barn cleaner for him, and then he got the job with FHA in Washington, D.C. Well, actually, that's not true. He got the job with Farm Home Administration in southern Iowa, and they moved to southern Iowa, and we stayed in contact. And of course, then Mary died, and we went through all of that with them, and we've just stayed in touch ever since. Those years were really hard years for a variety of reasons, and all of them not under any of my control. Uh, One is that we had to, um, go from a full-time job to a grad-ass situation, which paid almost nothing. And this was hard on your mom, as well as hard on the family. The commuting from Fayette to Iowa City wasn't bad at all because I was living in the camper, and that worked out sort of okay. But as I got more into the swing of things at Iowa, they gave me more and more responsibility. At first, I was just assisting in undergraduate courses, and then all of a sudden, I'm teaching graduate counterpoint, and I'm teaching a course in fugue, and it took a lot of preparation, but that experience was really good. Hervig was very supportive of me and the family, and we had, I think, really good time in Belle Plaine. Your mom was teaching there, and that worked out really well because she liked the principal and he liked her, and she sort of had a free hand, and so she could do some things that she'd always wanted to do. Belle Plaine, Victor was only a year, thank goodness, and it was tough. I think Victor was tough on everybody. I think everybody had difficulty with school that year in some shape or fashion. The only one I think that really lucked out in Victor was Heidi. She had a wonderful kindergarten experience there. Belle Plaine, on the other hand, was a really nice community, and we had some very strong friends there. A very interesting situation where our doctor in Belle Plaine was an African American, and nobody realized it. People didn't understand the language. He was just their doctor, and that was kind of fun. And then we graduated in 1970 and came to Indiana and interviewed for the job at Ball State, and fortunately I got it, and the rest is sort of history. No, I applied for 2 other jobs. I applied for a job at Cleveland Institute of Music, and I applied for a high school job in Guam. The high school, the job at Cleveland Institute was fish heads and rice. We couldn't have survived on the salary. And at that time, Cleveland was a hard place to be in. And so I didn't really want to subject the family to interurban problems. And so we came to Ball State, and like I said, the rest is history. Well, I started off as an assistant professor, and I was extremely fortunate that I had a boss that was absolutely a go-getter and knew how to go get. He knew all of the right moves to make, and he could make his point all the way up to the president. Because of that, we were able to obtain an ARP 2500 the first year I was there, which is an enormous piece of equipment costing something in the neighborhood of $12,000. He was always very supportive and very interested in developing the electronic music curriculum. No, Bob Sherman. Hargraves was sympathetic. Hargraves didn't understand a bit about electronic music. It was totally foreign country to him. But he always used something to his advantage. And I remember playing tape recorder with the Muncie Symphony when we did a piece for tape and orchestra that he wanted to do. And so he was open-ended that way. I taught theory and music caprice for, 2 years. And then Bob asked me to start the first courses in electronic music, and so we had 2 courses on the books. That curriculum, expanded. The program really grew up under the guise of a bachelor's degree in composition and theory. That lasted all the way through the 70s. By 1980, we had a well-established studio situation. The other person that was on the faculty that was very helpful was Morris Knight, who was very knowledgeable about, especially about tape machines and tape music, and an avid tape composer. He had done lots of stuff. And so that was very good to have him around, and he was very helpful. In 1980, I proposed a new curriculum, the MET curriculum, for the School of Music. And that was met with a lot of flack. Most of the people in applied music didn't see a reason for it. Most of the people outside the School of Music couldn't even begin to understand it. So we had our work to do. And so it went through committee after committee after committee after committee. After about, it took 8 years to actually get it to the point where it was an accepted 4-year degree program. All of that time, I was being sort of removed from the theory curriculum and into the music technology curriculum. And at the end of that, in the late 80s, we had a situation happen where Bob Sherman had retired, and they needed somebody to take over as associate director for academic studies. And I took that for a year. And I guess I made enough trouble for everybody that the dean came to me and said, if you'll step down, we'll make sure you have X number of dollars in your pocket to build your studio. And since I was not at all interested in being a politician, I stepped down. In hindsight, I think I did the right thing. One wonders, since the director of the school left that next year, had I stayed on, what the outcome might have been. But that's nothing but pure conjecture. Then through the 90s, we had the doctoral program developed, and by the end of the 90s, we had a brand new School of Music building being built with a new theater and a new studio suite. And so the whole trip was very challenging and very rewarding. The Mel Group was a spin-off from some of the techniques that Ken Gaburo had taught me at University of Iowa. He was there as a visiting professor for a semester, and his doctorate was from the University of Illinois, and most of the people that were associated with composition at the University of Illinois were also associated with a guy by the name of Herbert Brunn. And Herbert was a really strange guy. He had a doctorate from the University of Berlin, but he also had some expertise in linguistics and language, and theoretical language, not just speaking French or German or whatever. He was very interested in semantics. And so all of the guys that came out of that program had some experience with linguistics. And Gaburo had taken linguistics to a real stretch, where he would write choral music where syllables would become stretched and change in their phoneme structure as you sing along and so forth. And he was combining this with theatrical movement. And I took it one step further by saying, well, the Mel Group is musical experiments in linguistics. And what we would do is we would have a piece of music that offered some kind of macro-rhythmic structure where motion could accompany that structure. And then we would have the motion controlled by language, by words. Maybe a phrase, maybe one word, maybe just a series of phonemes. But the major idea is to bring structure to improvisation, so that you could improvise within a structure and have the audience make some kind of meaningful contact with it. Now, the audience never knew what the controls were. All they would see is a body or figure moving in space and doing these kinds of in many cases, it's very like slow motion movement. For instance, one of the things that Ken did was a 20-minute piece with 4 people entwined. And what they would do is unfold over 20 minutes, but you weren't supposed to allow the audience to see any motion. But it would start all closed up, and then it was posies. And so those are the kinds of things that we did. I had musicians working with me. I had dancers working with me. I had artists working with me. All sorts of multimedia guys that were very interested in expression and very much interested in improvisation. No,
Produced.
I never. We never put them together. I could go back through probably through the old programs and reconstruct it. Yeah. Okay. Boating. I've always been fascinated with boats because of my father. My father has always been associated with some kind of boat somewhere. If it wasn't a Navy boat, he was involved with a fishing boat and so on. And so as I grew up, and he became involved after he got out of the Navy in a fishing expedition with a sloop, and I can't remember her name, but she was a 61-foot catch-type schooner, and they went fishing for shark. And the reason they went fishing for shark is because shark is mostly made up of liver. And the liver is very rich in vitamin A. And that was the source of pharmaceutical vitamin A for years. And unfortunately, at the end of the 49s, they had come up with synthetic vitamin A, much cheaper. And so I can remember when shark's liver was selling at that time for $12 a pound, which was outrageous. I mean, that's the unheard of price. So that was a quick-lived job. But I never forgot being on the boat, and I never forgot the fun around boats that I enjoyed when the boat came to Southern California. Having said that, when we had the opportunity to buy the boat, that's a strange story in itself. Your mom had seen this on late night television, that somebody was selling pop-up campers over in Lebanon. And so she said, "We're going to Lebanon today." And I said, "Okay, what for?" She said, "You'll see." So we went over to Lebanon, and sure enough, here's a little pop-up camper. And she said, "We have to have this." And I said, "Okay." And sitting behind the camper was a little green 16-foot Starcraft. And I went over and looked at that, and it had a 65-horse Merc engine on it. And I said, "We need to have this." And so we bought the boat and the camper at the same time. Now, interesting part of that is we only had one car that could handle that. So every place we went, we had to make 2 trips. We would take the boat and then take the camper, or vice versa. The reason for Mississinewa is that it was the only lake close by that had primitive camping. There were other lakes, two other lakes, Lake Huntington and Lake Salamone. Now, Salamone was very narrow and didn't have nearly the kind of camping resources that Mississinewa had. So, long story short, we started camping at Mississinewa in primitive camping with the pop-up, and then I bring the boat the next time, and we go skiing and what have you. And besides that, one of my graduate assistants had a boat and a girlfriend, and he'd come up and he'd take you kids skiing and what have you, and it just was great fun. We did that for years, 5 years. Charlie Brown came about in the 5th year. We bought Charlie Brown from a guy that was having serious problems and unfortunately died of cancer. But Charlie was on Mississinewa for quite some time, and we used to go by it all the time, and I always admired the boat. It was a Starcraft inboard, outboard, and 25 feet long, and had its own galley and porta potty and everything we needed. So we bought it, and we were there for the first year, and I kept losing propellers because there was so much junk in the water. So we decided that we needed to make a change. Now, we bought Charlie in '85, and we went north in '86 and '87 to Michigan and Ohio and all over looking for another lake. And we never found one. Well, in '89 summer, we needed to replace Charlie's trailer. It had just worn out. And so we found a place in Illinois that would build us a new trailer. And so we started one weekend and came down to Highway 36 and out 36 to Park County, and Roger was living here at the time. And so we hung out overnight and went over to see Roger at the lodge, and then went on down to Illinois and had the new trailer built and put Charlie on the new trailer and came back. And the very next weekend we brought Charlie down and put him in here. Well, our lake is, for the most part, a lot cleaner than Mississinewa. And so we didn't have the propeller problems. We weren't running into junk and everything else. And we spent the whole summer pretty much down here living on Charlie and snooping around. And by the end of the summertime, we started looking around just on a lark for property. And we came down this road, and we were looking at that property was for sale, where Jonna's house is. And there was a guy standing in the road with a little blonde, tow-headed girl on his shoulder. And I said, "Do you know where so-and-so is?" And he said, "Yeah, it's up there." And he said, "Are you looking for a house?" And I said, "Well, I don't know." And Mom was with me, and he said, "Well, you want to see it? I have to move." And so Mom came in and looked at this house, and that's all it took. And we've been here ever since. We bought the Gull's Nest probably in 2000, so it was 10 years. Birdland, 2002. The Gully House, 2014. Most memorable performance? I would have to say, and I can't tell you when, it's early 50s, but watching Igor Stravinsky conduct the Symphony du Son.
Okay.
God, there's been so many performances.
Mm-hmm.
I can't remember any of the details, but probably the Stockhausen Kontakte. Well, I don't know that it's memorable, but it was one of the hardest performances I've ever been to, and that was playing the Rose Parade in a Razzi band. Probably living to 81. The hardest change was to learn how to deal with my disability. When I was working, well, for one thing, I was always extremely busy. And so I didn't have the luxury of, quote, thinking. I was so many times just in a react mode just to survive. So one of the things about retirement that's been really nice is it's given me a lot of time to reflect. Yeah, but more importantly, I guess on big issues. I told you that my high school math prof turned me on, and I'm still turned on. And part of the dilemma that I have is I don't have the math to support my interest. But for instance, this notion that Hawking's has just come up with multiple universes is very challenging to me because it's not that I've thought about that exactly, but almost. It's things like that that have given me time to ponder. And even though I don't have some of the tools that are necessary, I still have the Inquisition there. Probably our very first trip to San Francisco. That was really neat. Probably 1956. He was staying with Scotty and Adeline, I think.
Okay.
I'm not sure. Oh my Lord. I don't think any of them are like me. I think we have so many individuals, it's really hard to even contemplate that there are, people who think about things that I've thought about. Nick, Jasmine, David, even Phineas has, touched on stuff that remind me of me. I don't know that I'm acquainted with my personality. Well, there are so many. I would have loved to have been a student of Plato's. Just the depth and breadth of what he saw on his horizon was something that would have been extremely awesome to me. By the same token, I would have liked to have been among the troops with Eric the Red. I would have loved to have seen Vinland for the first time. I would have liked to have known Copernicus. Because of his deductibility. His method of deduction was just remarkable. And of course, one of my fascinations today is the scope and breadth of the Renaissance guys, especially Michelangelo. Now, I've never been a painter or a drawer or anything like that, but just his ability to imagine dimensions beyond himself. That would have been interesting to talk about. I don't know. I'm always fascinated with the early Romantics, particularly the Goethe. That kind of pre-transcendental thinking was, bordered on a spirituality that we hadn't had before, and we don't have yet. But I guess in every case, it has to do with something about how we think. Probably taking my first step after getting out of the isolation ward. Well, I'll go back to Salomar Beach. That was a really neat place because it was right on the ocean. And I was young enough to be extremely excited about sea lions. and we used to have a sea lion come up and sun right in front of the house, and that always really, I got a big kick out of that. And he would crawl up on a, we would, my dad had a square box, great big square box full of empty cans, and those would get really hot in the sunlight, and he'd come up and lay on the cans. I enjoyed ROTC. The two things I liked best about ROTC was I loved precision marching. That was so much fun, especially when you can do it as a group. It was really exciting. The other thing I liked about it was, of all things, we had to study a little bit about the history of warfare. And that was really interesting to go over cannon placements in the Civil War and stuff like this. It was very, very interesting. Best part of Upper Iowa? Well, I suppose the best part of Upper Iowa was it was the first time I was employed doing something I really wanted to do. And that was really rewarding. My favorite composition that I wrote. I suppose Anacrusis, the piece for harp. I still like that piece a whole lot. Yeah. Yeah, we do have a recording someplace with a lawnmower running through the middle of it. I don't know that I've always had that wonderment about nature and things, the how it all goes together, blah blah blah. I don't fancy myself as a poet. I maybe wish that I had more ability in that direction. But I used to try to ask questions that were, kind of inferential of poetry, but I don't recall ever, a time at when, aha, I started doing it. Well, I mean, I grew up with two cooks. Gil and my dad, always cooked. And although my mom and Opal cooked too, but no, it was my dad and Gil. Well, I don't know if this makes sense, but chopping sort of is the first part of cooking. It's sort of in the original sense the gathering process, and that's an interesting question. I'm not sure I can answer it fully. Oh my. Well, Harry Filer, who was a fraternity buddy of mine at COP, he was very special, and I'm very sorry that we didn't continue on with that. Let's see, is there anybody else? I mean, there are a lot of people that I should have stayed in contact with that just have fallen by the wayside. And but Harry's one of the more special guys. I wish I had stayed in contact longer with Bodley, because he was such a great musician. He's the choir director at COP. Yeah. ARP. Analog. Yes. Probably Black Earth. Yes. Music Concrete. Bernstein. Ooh boy, yes. Yes. They're two different animals. Well, I don't know. I guess one of the things that I'm sort of regretting is that when I had the chance, I didn't pay attention enough to know a little bit more about the history of the family. I know that we came from Norway on Scotty's side. I know that we wound up in St. Cloud, Minnesota. I know that the great-grandfather changed the name from Anderson to Scott by accident. I know that there were several Scotts. He went before a judge that didn't understand him, and the judge, he wanted the name changed to the village from which he came, according to the story, which he said, my dad said, was Kut, Norway, and we can't find a Kut, Norway. I've tried. Maybe it's the spelling, maybe it's the pronunciation, maybe I don't know what. By the same token, I haven't gone back into the records to find out if there is any record as to where he came from. They were all farmers. My dad was the first not to have farmed. My dad was the first to have tried to get into the Army when he was too young and got kicked out. He got into the Navy then and went on the world tour in 25. That's the picture in the hallway. And blah, blah, blah. There were several brothers, and I don't know any of them. I knew some cousins. On my mother's side, she indicated that there was a Bible someplace in North Carolina that had the family history going back to England on her side. Her dad was a baker. She was born in British Columbia. They lived in Seattle. Her sister married a baker, Uncle Lou, whom I'm named after. The family came from Seattle to San Francisco briefly and then went back. I'm not sure all of the ins and outs on that one. My mom met my dad in Los Angeles. Then somehow he's back at Bremerton Navy Yard in Seattle, and she's back up there. And then somehow they wind up in Ventura, and I don't know how that all comes about. My dad was married before to a French lady who was a member of a French ballet troupe, whom he met in Kansas City. And all of a sudden, they hadn't been married very long, maybe 6-7 months. And they were living in Des Moines, Iowa. He was working as a typewriter repairman. And she just up and disappears. And he finally found her in 1945. One of his buddies was a captain in the Naval Intelligence, and they found her in France again. And she was supposed to have no recollection of my dad or anything. And the story goes that she was hit in the head by a German rifle during World War I, and that she just had no memory of her trip to the United States or anything. Sad story. Then, of course, my dad meets Adeline again in Los Angeles. They get married in LA and move to Ventura. Well, he's already living in Ventura. And she gets a job in Ventura and in insurance. And she stayed her whole career there. Gil was from Nebraska. I'm not sure where, but his folks moved he and his two brothers to Ventura in the late 20s. and they stayed there until they died. Opal was born in Iowa, in Ottumwa. Her daddy was a sheriff there. And again, I don't know how she got to California. There are still members of her family in Iowa. Brown is the name. Opal Ida Brown. Mom goes to Alaska in 45. I don't know exactly when she meets George, but my guess is something in the neighborhood of 46, 47. They're married, I think, in 48. They come to live in the valley in California, in Merced, in probably 57. And they live there until he dies. And then Mom comes back to live with us in the 80s, along with Grandma T. She had her sister in Merced for a while, and then she passed on, and her daughter lived in Merced, Lois, and she has since passed on. But that sort of gives you a thumbnail idea of where everybody is sort of from and whence and so forth. George, I think, was born in Wisconsin. Now, George was handicapped with a small arm and a non-functional hand, and handled himself very well. He lived with that handicap very comfortably. He could do things that would amaze you, especially when it came to practical kinds of things like shooting. We went ptarmigan hunting once, and we were cleaning the birds afterwards, and everyone was heading ahead. But it's that kind of, thing. He was he wanted desperately to be a gold miner and just never struck it rich. But he tried very hard. He made his living working in Alaska Freight Lines. He was the office manager for Alaska Freight Lines in Fairbanks. And my mother was, always associated with either women's cosmetics or women's clothing. She sold women's clothes for years in Ventura, and then cosmetics in Alaska, and was. George passed on the schnitzel thing to me when they came to Lincolnshire, not Lincolnshire. He came, and it was just before Christmas, and made schnitzel for us. I wish I knew more about Gaby. All I know about Gaby is that he was from North Dakota, settled after the Army stint in San Luis Obispo and opened a practice there. He became very successful and very well-to-do. He was an investor. He let his money work for him. He had the 2 kids, and that's actually they had met, I think, before my dad died. There was a guy, a typewriter man in San Luis that my dad was friendly with, and they used to trade machines and stuff like that. And I think my dad and Adeline were up there one time and at a function where Gaby was. Then later on, the wife of that guy, and I can't remember names at this point, but the wife of that guy called Adeline and said, "I've got somebody I want you to meet." And so Adeline made the trip up and met Gaby, and the rest is history.